Good evening. I'm here to tell you about the most wonderful teachers. I have 2 teachers in my life and who have followed me through my life, who have taught me more than any educational institution on this earth is equipped to teach an individual. You probably think I'm really smart now, don't you? I gave birth to one on July 8th, 1970. He was the most innocent, precious, purest of all individuals that you can imagine. He was my son. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, and he couldn't speak. When the nurse handed him to me, she gave me the most precious words a mother can hear from her child, from anybody. She said, "You have a normal, healthy baby boy." And I was beside myself. I just held him in my arms, and all I could think of was now I am in charge of somebody's life. And this precious little person requires my attention and all that I can give him to grow up and be the most magnificent, strongest man. And someday he'll probably be a scientist. But I felt a hole as big as the Grand Canyon in a 6-pound, 4-ounce baby boy. Only I could feel it. Only I knew, as a mother, that was one of the gifts that I received. I asked the doctor, did he notice it? And he said, no. And if you keep talking that way, you'll make something wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with him. And I tucked my little head, and I went on. And because as a child, all the way up to adulthood, I was taught to respect elders. And anybody with any level of authority was a person that I needed to be respectful of. So I didn't ask him anymore. I went home and I asked my mom, and she didn't feel it either. She said, there's nothing wrong with him. So I waited a while, and I began asking other women who had become mothers, and even mothers who had been mothers for a while. And all of them said they either didn't know, or that I was making something up, or they were casting guilt on me for not giving him enough attention. So again, I took my little head, and I tried to wait. But then I went to other doctors. I said, I won't go back to that same doctor. Maybe he doesn't know, but there's something here. And then as time went by, believe it or not, I was chasing the biological clock for a little tiny baby because I didn't want him to spend a lot of time trying to grow up and catch up with the other children. Well, 2 years had gone by, and then I gave birth again. To this time, to a 5-pound, 4-ounce handful of screaming wrinkles. That child had a set of lungs that would not wait. So I thought, well, maybe one day she'll grow up and she'll be a vocalist. She'll be a wonderful singer. Well, she didn't do that. But they taught me how to love. Because my son, with his disability, taught me tenacity. I wasn't going to give up. That was my baby. And one day he'll be my son, who is a man. And I still wanted that scientist. Of course, he probably would have had other ideas, but that's what I wanted. And as I went to different doctors, they cast the blame on me. And 7 years had passed. 7 years and 32 doctors I went to, and all I got was a label. He has autism, except they said he's autistic. And I thought, well, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know what that means. And guess what? The doctor didn't know what it meant either. So I was more determined than ever. That was his way of teaching me, Mama, I'm depending on you. He couldn't say it, but he showed me. I was the catalyst. I was charged by God to guide him through adulthood. And in the meantime, I had this little princess. Her eyes were so bright, you could give the sun a day of rest and let her shine. She gave me joy. He gave me joy. They both gave me joy in their own way. Well, our family of four kind of dissipated because it's not unusual for the dad to leave. Now, I'm not blaming all dads because I know dads who will die, kill, and curse the Pope over their child, just trying to find resources or whatever they need. So I'm not downplaying dads. I'm just telling the truth. Many dads leave and moms are stuck there. And I was no exception. So I was really frayed at one time. I mean, just frazzled. And I had written notes to my son's teacher. And the school psychologist came to read those notes. And then, unbeknownst to me, many people in the school were reading my notes. And then he said to me, why don't you write an article? So I wrote it, and it felt good, and it felt good, and it felt good. I felt like I had something to say. I'd never written anything before, but I was excited about that. So I kept writing. And then it became a book. And I thought, this is too big for an article. And he said, well, why don't you just publish it? And I said, how do you do that? So I wrote off to people. I wrote and they didn't write back, or they wrote back and didn't want it. So I'm not one to wait very long because to me, life is short. So I published it myself. Didn't know how to do that either. But my Jeff, he's still looking at me. You got homework to do, Mom. So I said, I'll ask people. So I asked people, how do you publish a book? And they all just stared at me. And I said, okay, well, I'll take it a piece at a time. How do you make this happen? And I was showing them the typeset on the pages. And then I went to the newspaper, and they just kind of led me through peaks and valleys of how to do it. But I did it. And then once it was published, I was so excited. I think I ordered 500 copies. And I thought, oh, now I got to sell them. Then I was telling my next door neighbor, and she said, who's going to buy a book about a crazy kid? And my little head dropped again. And one day her dad was visiting. I didn't know him. And he said, oh my God, my daughter told me that you wrote a book. And how much is it? I think it was like $5 or something like that. He said, take 20. And just like the guy before us, he said, you're the only woman I've ever met with balls. So I said, I'll take it. I'll take what I can get. And he gave me $20 for my $5 book, so I was thrilled. And one day, the newspaper did a story on me. And I had a half a page in the Sunday paper. Ooh, I had made the big time, in my opinion. And the governor called. I told him he had the wrong number. I said, why would you want me? And he says, well, you are the Carolyn Betts who was in the paper this Sunday, right? I said, well, yeah, but it's just paper. And he said, you are the Carolyn Betts who had written the book, right? Well, yeah. Well, I need you to be on my council for developmental disabilities. I said, what in God's name would I have to teach anybody? That's what happens when this little person continues to look at you and say, you got homework, Mama. So I went, and I met world leaders, I met national leaders, and they all wanted information from me. I thought, okay, well, and then after a while I realized something very important to me. My children had taught me my potential. They taught me, you've got something to say. People need to hear what you have learned. And you don't shortchange yourself. When you go through adversity, it just sounds like adversity because people tend to poo-poo what they don't understand. People are not horrified by the horrible. They're horrified by the unknown. One of the things I wanted to do, again, right after graduating high school, was to get my degree. I started college. My dad, old-time school, said, just leave that college alone. You go to business school, become a secretary, and meet a good husband. There was no arguing because I was still from the school where you don't argue with your parents. You honor thy father and thy mother. So I tried to be a good girl, a good daughter, and I did that. That was not a good idea. I became a secretary, and I'm not downing secretaries, but I am not a good secretary. I worked it many years, but I didn't enjoy one of them, not one. But I did. I did what Daddy said, and I became a secretary, and it was hard. Oh, God, it was hard. I yearned so much for more. And then Jeff had pneumonia, and we had to move to Phoenix, Arizona. And we did that. And he almost died once. And I said, I don't know what I'll do, but I'm saving my baby. At the last time he had pneumonia, the doctor said, he won't make it through the night. Wrong number. So I crawled up under the oxygen tent with him, and my son made it through the night. But we also moved to Arizona. And here I was now serving on this governor's council. This was in the late 70s. And I felt done all that I could do. And the family of 4 had become a family of 3. And both these little people looking up at me, Mama, you got work to do. And after 40 years, 40, I went back to school. And I got my bachelor's degree. And I took a 1-year hiatus. And I got my master's degree. That was a part of my homework. That was something that I had yearned for years. I wanted that. I call them pieces of paper. I had done so much, but I still couldn't be hired for that which I could do because I lacked that piece of paper. Jeff is 43 years old now. He lives in a group home in Phoenix, Arizona. My beautiful daughter is right here. I learned that learning stops with life. The greatest teachers in my world are still there. My daughter asked me to walk across the stage with her when she received her master's degree. I wasn't going to because I thought I would be the only one there doing that. Because in kindergarten, she took me to school for her show and tell. But now I understand. I have learned that you never stop. If you need to move a mountain, you might not want to, but you can. You can dig a tunnel, climb over it, go around it. But if you want to get to the other side of your mountain, do it. Jeff still can't read, can't write, can't speak, but he's taught me well.